What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Football Over Analysis. Today we're talking about the Arizona Cardinals, their fantasy relevant players, and whether or not we are targeting or fading them in our drafts this summer. At quarterback, Jacoby Brissett set the world on fire when he took over for Kyler Murray last year. When Brissett took over for Kyler Murray, the offensive game plan was just for him to go back and chuck the ball 50 times a game, very much Jameis Winston style, which led to a career season for Trey McBride, a breakout for Michael Wilson, and some nice passing numbers for Brissett himself. Then this offseason, the Cardinals don't do a ton at the quarterback position. They bring in Gardner Minshew, they draft Carson Beck in the third round, but Brissett remains the starter on paper. However, we have this contract dispute that's been going on between Brissett and the Cardinals the entire offseason. Brissett wants an upgrade on the contract he got last year, which pays him as a backup. Brissett reasonably wants to be paid as a starter. The Cardinals, however, don't have much incentive to pay Brissett. He's not their long-term answer. He's probably not going to be on the roster beyond this season. There's just not a lot of reason for them to commit big money to him. And there definitely should be some middle ground here. Brissett did outperform his deal, and he's a well-respected, well-liked member of the locker room. The problem is, though, the longer that this situation carries on, the less likely it is that Jacoby Brissett's going to be the guy that's under center for Arizona come week one. Because when you look at all the moves here, first of all, it's a new coaching staff from what they had last year. They have zero ties to anybody that's on the roster that they themselves didn't bring in. They also obviously don't view Jacoby Brissett as a long-term answer. He's not likely to be here anyway. So if we get to a point in training camp where they're still at this impasse, they can't work out a deal, I wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals just trade him to another team, and they could go with Gardner Minshew, who has plenty of starting experience in the short term until they're ready to turn things over to Carson Beck. But even if Jacoby Brissett and the Cardinals do work out a contract before the season, I still don't have a ton of interest in Brissett, even though he put up great numbers last year. The thing about it is, the Cardinals are still going to be one of the worst teams in football this year. They're going to be playing for 2027 and beyond. So it's only a matter of time before they pull the plug on Brissett, not because he himself is playing poorly, but just because they're going to want to see what they have in their third-round pick in Carson Beck. And really, this Carson Beck thing is going to be a dark cloud looming over all of the skill position players for the Cardinals. Even if we get Brissett playing early, we know the losses are going to pile up. We're going to ask the question every week, like, is this the week that they start going to Carson Beck? When they do, what is that going to do to Trey McBride? What is that going to do to Michael Wilson? What does that mean for Jeremiah Love? That lack of a clear floor and a clear path to unlocking the ceilings of these skill position guys is going to make a lot of them tough to draft at where they're going this year. So that's going to bring us to Jeremiah Love, one of the top prospects in the draft this year, the Cardinals' first-round pick. So Jeremiah Love comes in as the RB12 right now. He's going at about the 2-3 turn. Are we fading him or targeting him at that price? For me, it's going to be a fade. And I don't think that price is outrageous for Love. It's not as expensive as, say, Bijan Robinson was in his rookie year when you were drafting him in the first round and he finished as RB9. And I don't like the situation that Love is going to be in for his rookie year. And first of all, when we go back and look at the history of first-round running backs, even the most highly regarded prospects, guys like Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, it took a little time for them to fully break out and perform as the RB1s that they were being drafted as. And Love is definitely going to play and have a significant role in his rookie year, but it might just not be at the level that people expect it to be at. And lest we forget, Tyler Algier, the same Tyler Algier that has been a thorn in the side of Bijan Robinson for almost his entire career, is now in Arizona. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this was a situation that was not unlike what the dynamic was between Bijan and Algier in Bijan's rookie season in Atlanta. You could also make a case that this could be like the David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs dynamic in Gibbs' rookie season, where Gibbs was just kind of mixed in early in the season. He played maybe a third of the snaps while Montgomery did a lot of the heavy lifting throughout the first half of the season. And then you have the fact, again, that this is going to be a bad team that's going to be losing a lot of games. And at some point, they're going to have the conversation about, do we really want to put Jeremiah Love, one of our franchise players, in harm's way in a lost season? So during the key points of the season where you need Jeremiah Love the most, the fantasy playoffs, is he going to be active? Is he going to be still playing a significant role at that point in the season. With these bad teams, there's always the risk that they're going to shut down their star running backs late in the year. So while I'm very excited about what Jeremiah Love can do in the future, I just don't think that this is going to be the year to have him in fantasy. And then at wide receiver, the only Arizona Cardinal that was not just eating week after week in the Jacoby Brissett offense was former first-round pick, very close to being first-round bust, Marvin Harrison Jr. And Harrison has just been a complete disaster his first 2 years in the league. He's finished as the wide receiver 30 and then the wide receiver 49 in his first 2 seasons. A complete disaster on a guy that was going at the 1-2 turn in his rookie season. And Harrison, I just wouldn't touch this guy with a 10-foot pole. I don't know why you would. Like, with Harrison, we've just seen zero signs of him being a dominant receiver in this league. And he goes in a range where there's guys like Jameson Williams, Rome Odunze, and Brian Thomas Jr. Give me all 3 of those guys every single time over Marvin Harrison. At least with a guy like Brian Thomas, we've seen him dominate in the league before. At least with Jameson Williams, we've seen like the stretches where he's been a wide receiver 1. At least with Rome Odunze, we've seen 1 good month of consistent play. With Marvin Harrison, we've seen none of that. We haven't even seen him be capable of putting back-to-back weeks of decent fantasy production. And I don't see how the situation this year is conducive to a breakout for Marvin Harrison. Not when Jacoby Brissett is on basically borrowed time before he eventually makes his way to the bench in favor of a third-round rookie that isn't even going to be a starter next year in Carson Beck. So, do you think Carson Beck is going to be the one that helps Marvin Harrison break out and reach new plateaus as a fantasy receiver? If you do, God help you. I sure don't. We don't even know that Harrison is truly the wide receiver 1 on his team anymore. That role could very much belong to Michael Wilson, who did break out last season with Jacoby Brissett. Wilson, from week 11 on, just had an absolutely dominant stretch to finish as the wide receiver 10 overall last season. And Wilson right now is currently going as the wide receiver 41, 10 spots after Marvin Harrison. So, also, as much as I wouldn't take Harrison over the guys he's being drafted around, I sure would much rather wait and get Michael Wilson as opposed to spending an earlier pick on Marvin Harrison. And the thing with Michael Wilson is you're still going to be concerned about him because of the Carson Beck thing, but he comes in a range in the draft where there's a little less risk attached to it. So if Wilson becomes unplayable because of Beck later in the season, if you're drafting him in like the 9th, 10th round or later, it's not going to hurt you nearly as much as taking a guy like Harrison in the 6th or 7th round. And then we have Trey McBride, and as much as it hurts me to say this, Trey McBride is also going to be a fade for me, at least in redraft. McBride, who was just unlocked by Jacoby Brissett last year, it was so vindicating seeing McBride go off and become this dominant threat in the red zone with Brissett under center, after watching Kyler Murray just give you pitiful quarterback play year after year that really held McBride back. So with McBride, you're going to expect some natural regression from what he did last year. The season that McBride had doesn't come around very often, and it's even harder to come close to repeating something like that. He's still going to have a good season, but if you're expecting the same level that you got last year, you're probably going to be disappointed. So McBride, where he's at, is going to be a fade. I have Brock Bowers as my tight end 1 overall, Colston Loveland as my tight end 2. So I'd much rather be drafting Loveland in the tail end of round 3, round 4, than I would spending a second rounder to get Trey McBride. And that's going to do it for this one, guys. So with the Cardinals, I don't have a lot of interest here. It's going to be one of those bad teams that I think is going to be really playing for 2027 the further we get into the year. So it's going to be very hard to trust their key guys to be performing when we need them to the most. So I thank you guys so much for watching, and we will talk to you next time when we go over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.